All right, so we're recording. This is the first session of the Google Slides class, and what we'll do just to kind of kick it off is I will give a overview of kind of where to access all this information and where to access the resources and where I'll be posting the agenda, where you'll be submitting your projects and things like that. And this first session will kind of go through a little bit of that housekeeping just to kind of show you what we'll do. For some of you who've taken my STIs before, it'll be familiar because I kind of use the same format for all of them. And then we'll kind of set up the baseline today of your folder in Google Drive, which will end up being where you have sort of a bunch of stuff in there. And then that will very much become part of the project or the project in and of itself, because that's where you'll end up building things and working on things. And I'll show you how to turn that stuff in. So I do everything based on my blog, my Heathcote Tech blog. And what I'll do is I'll just take this and the address and I'll post this in the chat right now, just so you have it. This blog is something I use for students, staff, parents, whatever. So it has an ongoing list of posts. Now, these posts are sometimes assignments for kids. Sometimes it's kind of poetry festival or capstone stuff for parents and students. There's tutorials on here. There's all sorts of stuff on here. Across this orange menu bar, you have this STI dropdown, and this particular class is under Google. And then it's the top one because it's the most current class that I'm doing. So this is this Google Slides Beyond the Presentation post. So if you click on that, what it'll end up doing is it takes you to the blog page just for this class. And so we'll break down, we got the dates and stuff. This is a presentation that I've used, and we'll go through it a little bit. I'll show you how to kind of create the things that I have in this presentation. And then eventually we'll post the recordings of the sessions down below. So if you want to go back and review any of these things. The agenda will open up in a new tab, and it just gives you kind of a breakdown of what we're going to do, just kind of go over a couple of things. I like to do this kind of initial spot with every class I do because it's good to review sort of the power of like Google Chrome, the reason why you have things like extensions and how they're different from apps, because sometimes those will actually then matter in terms of how you use something like Google Slides. So I always like to do sort of a brief overview, kind of make sure everyone's on the same page with some basics of Chrome, Drive, kind of Google in general, and then we'll get on to the other stuff. There is a participant project document, which will end up looking like this. Nobody has access to it yet, but essentially what we'll do is I will give you guys access to this in a couple of weeks towards the end. You'll literally just put your name in one column. I'll show you and make sure everyone knows how to get a link to their folder. You'll get a link to your Google Drive folder that we create for this class. You'll put that link in, and the notes is just kind of like a couple sentences where you talk about whether you focused on one aspect and kind of went deep into what we were talking about, or if that folder contains a whole bunch of things, because I'm fine with the folder having like one super detailed Google slide presentation in there, but I'm also fine with the folder having 6 kind of halfway done, half in progress experiments, because either way, I feel like that's the project, right? The project is for you to learn more about slides and how you can use them in different ways. So I'm good with whatever. And that's why the folder will end up just being this like huge kind of collection of stuff. And then that notes thing is just a little explanation about the deep dive you did on one style, or the reason why there's 6 different slideshows in there, and the reason why you kind of just were experimenting. And I'm good either way. This is just, like I said, we'll go through this in a second, but there's little fun things like this, like my goofy little cartoon character, kind of show you how to do things like that, because one thing I don't like are bullet points. And I think those are horrible. There's a time and a place for them, but they're very infrequent, especially when you're giving a presentation. There's ways where you can use like the different formats, the different slide layouts to kind of keep the audience engaged, keep the attention, which we know, whether it be adults or students, want to kind of keep everyone engaged, right? So kind of going through these like simple big hits, and we'll talk more about design and stuff as we go through this course, but I generally operate on a 6 words or 1 image rough rule, because it kind of draws the audience's attention to that one thing. And again, whether it's a student, a staff member, colleague, whatever, point of this is like you really want to use this presentation to kind of gain and capture attention and retain that attention. And there's all these different, again, color schemes, layouts and stuff where you can use that to kind of keep that focus and keep that pace. So we will talk about this, and this is important. Incognito is often misunderstood and confuses people. And this is important because if you're making something as a teacher that you're going to share with students, one of the issues is always like, how do I know they see it this way? Or how do I know it's not visible? How can I check as if I was a student? Questions like that. So Incognito is good because what Incognito does is it doesn't have you signed into anything. So you're seeing whatever you look at, like as if you're a complete stranger. And that's really helpful because you may have something on like your web page, let's say, or a file you're going to share with your students, and you want to make sure it's not public. So you would take that link and you would paste it into an incognito mode. And hopefully what would happen to be, it would say, you don't have permission. Awesome. That's exactly what you wanted. Flip side is you want to make something public and you want to make sure it's visible to anybody. You would do the same thing. You would copy that link, paste it into an incognito window, and hopefully you'll see it. Because incognito means you're not signed in, it kind of lets you test those security settings and make sure you have the right permission set on your file, which is very helpful. And it's just, and it probably won't show. Let me stop the share real quick and I'll share again, because this is really important to understand this distinction. I'm going to share this, and then let's go to Chrome. We'll go File, New Incognito Window. Now, when we do this, it tells you you've got incognito. One thing that's kind of the misunderstood or misconstrued thing is that everyone thinks that when you do this, nobody knows what you're doing. And that's not true. The browser window itself, this little window, doesn't retain history, doesn't like save cookies and things like that. However, you are still bound by your connection to the internet. So what I mean by that is if you're on a district device, you will get things blocked because you're still on that district device, and that district controls our district firewall or security protections protects the device, not the browser window. Like we connect and authenticate through the district. So it doesn't matter if you're in incognito, you still can't go to poker websites, adult websites, gambling. You still can't go to that stuff. Oftentimes people get nervous thinking that kids especially can go into incognito window and like see whatever they want. So there's 2 things with that. One is on student devices, like on student Chromebooks, we actually block incognito. So they can't even go into incognito mode as students. If it's a district device, we still block the device itself. So even if they had a way around it, or it wouldn't matter because our district firewall software is on the device itself, not about the browser window. Does that make sense about incognito? Okay. So I just like to make sure that's clear because I know sometimes people kind of misunderstand what that means. The district is still tracking this device. So if I went to whatever, a gambling website, it would be blocked, but they would also know that I went to a gambling website. So, but incognito window is great because, and here's a sort of a real world example of this, is I have this, right? I have this is the project document. I haven't shared this with anyone. If I want to make sure that this is not shared with anyone, I can hit that share button and it says privately only to me. But if I wanted to double check it, I can copy this link. And when I come to incognito, I can paste it in. And once it loads, it'll tell me that I need access. See, it's telling me to sign in because incognito is not signed in as me. It's like a fresh, clean, sort of anonymous window for the device. I can also then come over here and say, I want to make sure that my agenda is visible. So I go share. It tells me it's public on the web. And what's really nice about Google is it already tells you that. But I can still copy this link, paste it in here, and then I see it. So I know that my settings are set correctly. I know that the one that I want restricted is restricted, and I know the one that I want public is public. And that's helpful. And that's where Incognito Window really comes into play, is when you want to see, you want to make sure you're looking at something without being signed into it. Incognito is a great way just to check how it looks for somebody that's not you, making sure you have sort of the right settings, it's published the right way, things like that. Any questions so far? Feel free to just shout out or raise the digital hand or whatever. Everyone good? All right, cool. So that's Incognito. Again, just it's a quick thing. It's also just making sure everyone is aware that it's not, allowing kids especially to circumvent things. The other thing is, it used to be called the people feature, and now it's called the profiles. And what that is, and I'll share the whole screen again so you can see it, is when I'm in Chrome, up here, there's this profiles button. Now you can see I have all these different profiles. This is important to keep your different Google accounts separate. Now I have a ton on here because I keep doing these tutorials, so I keep having to add Google accounts. But what's also great is I can do things like add my daughter, right? So I can check she's going to be a 6th grader. So I could add my daughter. Cool. I can add, the Heathcote school account. We have a Heathcote social media account. We have like there's a Google testing account that I use, like when we did like the Google certified trainer course, like that's on here. If a student is telling me they're having issues, I can actually log in as a student, and I'm not conflicting accounts. I'm being completely separate, keeping everything contained. And where that really comes into play is on a straight Google window. The reason why I say this is because what happens is people often get confused. And people will click on this head right here that's inside of the web page, and they'll add another account. You don't want to do that. Because what that then does is it adds another Google account inside of this little head that's up here, which is the browser window itself. And you don't want to do that. You want to be able to keep these things separate. Because, for instance, if I come over here, let's go to Isabel, you'll notice as soon as it opens, hers looks different than mine, right? Hers is purple. She has different bookmarks. I have different bookmarks. Extensions are these things over here, like all these little buttons, right? Like I have certain extensions. She has different extensions. That's why you want to use profiles, because you want to keep these things separate. You don't want to log in to one Google account inside of another, because then you're not going to have what you expect to have. Like, for instance, when we look at this, if I had, and this comes into play again when you're using things like out of Drive. So like Cami, right? We both have Cami. On mine, though, because I'm attached to my profile, I have the educator, like teacher admin version of Cami. On hers, she has the student Cami tied to her Drive. This matters because if I was doing something and I came back over here, and if I added an account and I added my daughter's account here, there would be a conflict in the Cami permissions, and she might do something in Cami that saves to my Drive because this is my profile. So that's why profiles are so important. Keeping those people separate, so that way you don't have overlapping conflicts, especially useful when, like I have all those student accounts on there, because what I'll do is when I'm working, and you, at least at the elementary level in Scarsdale, you have access to your students' passwords. So you want to see what a student says, oh, I can't see this thing. I can't, it's not working. It doesn't look the way you showed me in class. You can go to that profile. You can add one of your students' accounts, which I do often to check when they say that they're having difficulty with something. I'll log in as them to try to replicate a problem to see what they're seeing. And that way it keeps my stuff and their stuff totally separate. Now, high school, different, obviously, Amanda, because they can, manage their own passwords. So you don't have the ability to add a student account in that way. But it's still useful, like with children, like you could then add your children's accounts, which is also helpful for me as a Scarsdale teacher with Scarsdale kids in the district. I use my students or my children often as like test beds for things like that. I'll use that profile of my son, my daughter to say, all right, let me see what it looks like from the student side. Or if we're getting questions about like, oh, these kids are complaining about something, I'll say, all right, let me go check. Let me use one of my personal children's accounts and check. Ms. Lloyd, question.
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, the difference between this and Incognito is you get to just keep them like they're bookmarked there, so you can just go into it. Otherwise, because I've done that in the past to test a site, I've gone into Incognito as a student. So this would just take it's almost like favoriting them. Is that correct? So I can just
totally. So Incognito is just like a quick check of like, hey, let me just see if what this looks like, not as me, just as generic stranger in the world, right? Having the student listed there is helpful because it keeps that student account like a bookmark or a favorite separate from your own, but allows you quick access to that so you can basically toggle between and see, all right, like what does theirs really look like from their perspective? So yeah.
So if I log in as that student and in profiles, I add them as a profile, I can go back and forth and check it if I'm troubleshooting.
Totally. Yeah. And exactly. And that's like what I do so often. And I have a bunch and you have to be like, I have to go through like, there's like a dozen in there. Every September, I kind of go through and I like delete like the previous year's demo accounts or the previous year's kids that I was testing. But when you're doing it, what's so great about it is like, I'm here and I'm on my profile, right? But when I go and I switch to my daughter, you see how it's purple? So it's like, I know that I'm now looking at it from her perspective. So, and that's really good because I can be like, all right, if my student was like, but my bookmark's not there, I can log in as them and be like, oh, right, your bookmark isn't there. Or you can say, oh, no, look, you got to go over to these 3 little lines here and there's more bookmarks there. Because sometimes, especially at the elementary level, it's so hard to kind of discern what really the problem is because they may not be articulating it in a way that makes sense, which is just because, they're not exactly sure how to describe it. You're not exactly sure what they should be looking for. So that's why being able to actually log in as them is very helpful because you can see how they're seeing it, help them troubleshoot and things like that. So yeah, and like I said, Incognito is just like a quick hit. Like I want to do a quick check to make sure that something is restricted, that nobody can see it. Use Incognito. I use the profiles, like I said, when students have issues. Like this one student up here, Eli was having a ton of issues with different things. So I left him there and it just turned out that he had like we just had to like sometimes ghost in the machine kind of thing. Like we basically had to back up all his files, delete his account, remake his account, and then put his files back. And it was just a quirk. So it's just, yeah. And that's like you said, like bookmark. It's just that way I can have kind of a quick reference point. Now, obviously for you middle school, high school people, it's different. And then also too, Sarah, I don't know how Edgemont works, but like in Scarsdale, middle school and high school, they can change their passwords. Elementary, they can't, which is why classroom teachers have access to the kids' passwords, at least at the elementary level.
Well, honestly, I'm not sure actually how it works at Edgemont.
Yeah.
But I'm also an art teacher, so we're not using the tech as much.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. That's why I just kind of like to cover those things just a little bit to give everyone a little bit of sense of like what's possible. It's obviously going to be different for everyone, which is cool, but different is good. All right, so that's Incognito and the profile piece. Let me jump to the next thing. So the next thing, just kind of we're going to go over some basics of slides. And this is actually helpful, not just with slides, but with anything in the Google world. It doesn't have to be a slide in the traditional sense of the word. Documents, drawing, Google Slides, you can change the page setup to make it be something else. It doesn't have to look like a slide. You can reorient it to be 8.5 by 11. You can change that size. And that's really nice because it can help you to start think about slides, not just as bullet point presentation software, but I often, when people say it to me, like I want to do a book, I actually don't like Google Docs for that. I'll actually make books in Google Slides. I want it to look like a piece of paper. I just change the page layout. The reason I do that is, and we'll get to it in a minute when we start making stuff, is Google Docs, the primary piece is text. It's all text-based, right? And it's all about the text inside the margins. Google Slides is about objects, and you can move those objects around and interchange them and layer them and do things with slides that you can't do with a document. So I'll use a slide deck, and the slide decks are also nice because you can put hyperlinks from one page to the next and things like that, much like a table of contents or sort of headers and stuff in Docs. And that's really nice because you can change these things around, so you can start to think about it as not just that simple bulleted presentation. And that's really helpful. And then you can actually change. See, this is kind of the vertical where it actually changes the slide deck to look like that. So thinking outside the box, like I said, what we're going to cover is how to use slides in these different ways. You know, I said earlier, I use the 1 image or 6 words rule. It's not a hard and fast rule because obviously there's times where even with kids, you do a compare contrast or things like that. And then obviously on this slide, and this is what I always like to call my irony slide, because this slide has the headline, no bullet points, and then literally underneath it are bullet points. And that is actually done intentionally. Like, people don't believe it. Like, I try to have fun with these things. Because sometimes you're gonna have to do stuff, right? Sometimes you're just gonna have to like make a list. But if we work on the premise that everything has to be a bullet point, then everything's gonna be a bullet point and everything's gonna look boring and bland like bullet points. But if you work on the premise that bullet points aren't allowed and that the visuals have to be clean and crisp and it has to be simple, you know, for the audience to take in and digest, you start then thinking about it in a different way, and you start using and designing in a different way, which then allows you to like, oh, okay, I got to use some bullet points here, fine. But it means you're not relying on them. And it means you're thinking about things differently, which is why I start with that 1 image or 6 words rule to kind of get the notion about, no, it's more about the visual and what you're saying in a presentation. So jumping down to the Ignite talks, those are ones that we use a lot with students. Ignite talks are sort of like a professional speaking thing, like a TED talk, but Ignites are 5 minutes, 20 slides. They auto advance every 15 seconds. So it's about keeping the pace of the story. It's about presenting in a timely fashion. We do them with students in the 4th and 5th grade, but we do 1 minute and 45 seconds total length. So they'll do 15 seconds a slide, 7 slides, 1 minute and 45. And what the kids have to do is they have to come up with a very concise, rehearsed presentation where they kind of tell a story in a very clean and crisp way. And then that goes back to the 1 image or 6 words, because if you're telling your audience a story and there's only 15 seconds before the slide changes, you can't have a lot on that slide. You have to have something that is going to reinforce what you're saying. And that's what kind of a lot of this is about using the slides to kind of not be the one thing, but to help reinforce what you're saying, either as the teacher, as the presenter, whatever it is, to not have it be just kind of a static object. TED Talks are obviously different. They're a little bit longer and they're a little bit more free flowing. But again, if you ever watch a TED Talk, the slides that they use are more traditional slides in the sense of like an actual like slide, you know, click the button and the slides spin around, because they're basically showing pictures. Because again, it's about the narrative and it's about the talk and it's about using the visual to kind of reinforce the point. Because like, if you can read it off the slide, like, why is the person there doing the presentation kind of vibe? But we also do things like comic books, kind of going back to that first slide where my little guy shows up. We make comic books and graphic novels in Google Slides, the virtual classroom things. So there's a ton of options, and we're going to kind of cover all these things with that notion that the bullet point is a last resort and that every slide deck needs at least 1 slide of pure irony. And this is my slide of pure irony. Cool. questions, anything so far? We're good. Am I moving too fast, moving too slow? Any thoughts? We're good. All right. So first thing I want you guys to do is I want you to go into your Google Drive. I want you to make a folder in Drive called STI 5591. So make that folder and then share that folder with me. And that'll just be the first thing, because essentially then when I ask you to make stuff, we're going to always make stuff in that folder. And then this folder will eventually become the thing that's like your project, because it'll have this collection of, you know, attempts at things, or maybe you've kind of vibe with one style. But yeah, STI 5591, and share it with me.
I just want you to know that my server is being really pokey, and I'm getting the little rotating circle. So
It's fine.
Drive, but I don't know why it's taking so long.
No problem. I'm in rural Maine on a DSL connection, so you know, it's all good. We're you know, I'm impressed it stayed connected this long. So.
Oh, now it's telling me I'm not connected. Weird. All right.
Your message today came through Frontline. So what? Just confirming your email, since I'm
Oh,
not.
sorry. It's CCASAL at scarsdaleschools.org.
So 2 C's.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat too, just in case. But yeah, that's also why we try not to do like more than 2 hours of a summer class, because when people are on, you know, funky wonky vacation land style internet connections, you know, you got to be flexible. All right, cool. So
I'm sorry, Chris, it's saying there's something wrong with the proxy server, or the address is incorrect.
and you went to drive.google.com.
Yeah, it's basically now not letting me open, like I'm in my browser, but nothing is showing up. It just says no internet.
You're on a district device.
Yes.
Share your screen real quick. Let's take a
Yeah.
look. Share the desktop, and share the desktop, not just the window.
Okay. I don't know if I'm doing this right. This is what.
Let's
I
take a
got.
look. Yeah, stop or stop sharing for a second. And then next time when you go to share, like share again, but then in the top left-hand corner of the share window, one of your options should be desktop. And it'll be the one where you see all the things. Share that so I can see kind of the whole thing.
I'm looking. Where would it say?
Oh, when you go to share the screen, when your top left first choice doesn't say desktop.
It doesn't say desktop, but let me try.
Curious. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you got it. Oh, right. And you're on a Windows computer because you're a high school teacher. Yeah. So
I mean, I could try restarting. I'd have to probably drop Zoom.
no, that's fine. Don't worry about it for right now. Just know that you'll have to do that.
And it was
obviously,
5592.
yeah, you're obviously connected to the internet. So the reason why I say that is like we're working on a new firewall. We're doing new software and stuff, and how it behaves with the Mac is different than how it behaves with the PC. And I'm not that familiar with the PC side. Generally, when you see that on a Mac, it means that you have to uninstall the firewall software and then reinstall it, which is why we're moving to a different firewall software. So just, you know, do the best you can for right now. What you could try to do is you could try, just for the sake of this class, as we're going through things, you could try opening up one of your other browsers like Edge and try logging into Drive there, just to see if it works. But yeah, so we're actually like, and you're right there. Hit the little, what is that? because that was somebody who was in Gmail. Whose profile was that?
Well, that was like my other private Gmail account, which I had to open in a different browser, but now it's at
No,
the
but
top.
it's curious because it's in Chrome though too. So
Yeah, but it just said not connected. Like all of this was working like 3 minutes
Gotcha.
ago. And then all of a sudden,
it happens.
um,
It's all good. So
yeah.
try like
Right.
an edge, and then if it doesn't, don't worry about it.
Okay.
And then you could always go back and sort of talk, we'll talk about the different things. So one quick thing, this is like this, we'll get the super bland stuff out of the way. And that is that you can create, like, especially if we use Cami. So, Sarah, and I don't know if you guys use Cami at Edgemont. Okay, so you know Cami, Marco. Okay, cool. So you can easily make a workbook, right? If you had to in Google Slides. And all you have to do for that is just save as a PDF. So, like, for instance, if I do this, share my screen. So, like, I have this multiple users, slideshow, file, download, PDF. And that's really nice because then what it does is it takes that from a Google Slide file and makes it a PDF that you can then put into Cami and mark up and add stuff to. So if you had something that you were working on and you wanted the kids to kind of mess with it or annotate on it, but you didn't want them to mess with the actual presentation, sometimes the easiest solution is the best solution. And like, that's just a really easy way to do things, is if you had started sort of a collection. I know some teachers have used Google Slides as a way to put in like scans of workbook pages or things like that, where they also have like directions next to them. So this is then an easy way to take that slide deck and just save it out as a PDF. And then you can upload it to Cami. Now, inside of this is the blog post. There's actually a link to detailed directions about doing that. It's the most sort of mundane, basic way of doing things, but it's helpful to know that that PDF download is always an option. Now, the quirk is, this is a quirk, it is file download as PDF, right? Which is a bit of a pain because if you want to put it into Cami, Google Classroom has got to be in Drive, right? It doesn't let you save to PDF in Drive. So you basically do download as PDF, and then once it downloads, just upload that, just drag that PDF file right back into your Drive folder. So you have both versions. That's just sort of one of the caveats, is it doesn't go direct to like the same location. But it's just a handy, helpful way of having that if you want somebody to use an app like Cami to mark up your Google Slideshow, because they can't mark up a Google Slides in the same way. Like, there's other tools that you can use, but I like Cami the best because Cami we have, at least in Scarsdale, and it sounds like Edgemont has it. We have it. It's paid for. It works phenomenally with PDF files. So like, simple is easy. Have your slideshow, download as PDF, re-upload it to Drive, and then disseminate it and have the kids mess with it in Cami. Cool. That's the easy one. That slideshow can look, whatever you could do. Like I said, pictures of workbook pages. You could do your own fill in the blanks. You can write your own.
Gone over that, Chris, because we had Cami.
Mhm.
However, we weren't really trained in Cami. And I found sometimes when I tried to do it on my own, everybody was writing over the same document. I was missing a step and I didn't know what it was and I couldn't figure it out.
So probably what happened was you gave everyone access to the same file. So you didn't give a version to everyone. Like, you gave, everyone was working off of one file.
Yeah, I clearly did something wrong. I just don't know what it was. And we weren't really, this last year, we weren't really trained in anything. It was just like, this is what we have, and Google how to figure it out.
Yeah, so no problem. And I'll show you that, and that's really easy. So if I look at, let me come back to the blog post. All right, so on my blog post about this, in here, there's this link, right? And if you click this link, it actually opens up another blog post. In this other blog post is, once it loads, are tutorials There's a whole step-by-step. Now, our new firewall is sort of blocking these embedded YouTube videos. Oh, there it goes. But there's embedded YouTube videos and things with like, you know, tutorials on how to do it. So if you want, the first thing I would say for you to start with is start with this blog post. And I can just, as a shortcut, I'll put this in the chat. Start with this blog post as a way to kind of get familiar with Cami. And then start there, because like I said, this step-by-step tutorial plus this video tutorial will kind of walk you through it. Oh, there it goes. Now it's loading. Now, the other thing is, and this is here's a little trick for everyone. If you have a document and this works for any file that's in Drive, you have a document and you want to share it with people, but you don't want everyone working on the same one, right? You want them all to have their own version. A couple of ways you could do it. One way at the elementary level in Scarsdale is we use something called Hapara, and you can use Hapara to create individual copies for every student. If you use Google Classroom, you can attach it as an assignment and it will basically make a copy for every student. But the super awesome, super simple way to do it without using Hapara or Google Classroom is if you take this button, the share button, and if you copy this link, now this isn't anyone on the internet thing, you copy this link. Now, if I go and I paste this link here, now if you look closely at this, you'll notice at the very end, it says edit USP equals sharing. You guys see that? So if you take that and you delete it and write the word copy, and you give this link to everyone, what it'll do is when they click on the link or go to the link, it will tell them that they must make a copy of this document. It basically is a forced copy. And it's just a matter of when you're looking at this, and I always forget, I don't think I can zoom in, but it's essentially, and I'll do it like this. Let me go into, here, let me come to the end of this. I'll make a quick fake slide over here. Oops, not what I wanted. So if this is the link, and this way it's just a little bit bigger for everyone. So if this is the link to your document, and this works for anything, you get that link, and I'll show you how to do it for PDF too. It works the same way. You get this, you'll see this is at the very end of it. And basically what that means is it's taking the sharing permissions from whatever you set to share. All you do is just replace it with the word copy. Then this link, so actually let me change this and I'll do this so you can see them both. So I take the original and I just change it to be copy. So then what I would do is I would give this bottom one out to students or whomever. So you can copy that, paste that on a website, email it to kids, do whatever you want. You don't need Google Classroom. You don't need Hapara. You don't need anything for it. I could give you guys this link right now, and it would force you to make a copy of this presentation. So you can do that, and that's an easy way to make sure everyone gets their own. Now, the PDFs work a little bit different, but the same way, because if you go into Drive, and let's do a quick search in Drive for PDF. Because PDFs don't have the same share button, right? So here's a PDF. They don't have the share button like a Google Doc does or a Google slideshow. But what they do is, and right now, you can't share this. Even it's just taking a while to load, because if you looked up here, the address is different because it's like a preview. It's not the actual file. But if you go to the three dots and you do open a new window, what it'll do is it'll give you, once it loads, it'll actually give you the same thing. It'll give you a URL. It'll give you a link. So here, I'll copy that and then I'll put that in my It'll come down to the bottom of this, and let's do a new one. So when I just did that new window, you'll notice this one looks a little bit different. It doesn't say sharing at the end. See that? It doesn't say sharing, it just says drive open. But same deal as if you just come over here and change it from view to copy, it'll force whoever clicks on that link to make a copy of that PDF in their own drive. So that's just another way to be able to sort of force the copies. Does that make sense to everyone? That little copy trick is kind of fun. Just because it gives you a little bit of extra, like I said, if you're not using Hapara, if you're not using Google Classroom, if there's, or if you're working with people, you might do a thing where maybe you're even working with staff where somebody's like, hey, I want this thing, like, and you don't want them to mess with it. Same deal. You can give them that sharing link, just erase that edit equals sharing at the end and make it say copy. It forces them to make their own copy when they're looking at it, which is really nice because then it won't mess with yours, which is handy. So that's a handy little trick. Cool. All right, so that tis that. All right, let's see. Where's my blog post? Let's get back to the blog post. There we go. All right, now, and actually, Kathleen, does that make, are you good with that before I move on about making the copy?
I'm going to play around with it.
Cool.
The PDF, I was finding a little tricky how you got that to open up as a second page, but
When you click on the
when you
click on the PDF and you see it in that preview window, go to the three dots. And then open a new window, because when you just look at a PDF, it's not actually the file, it's like a preview of the file. So you don't want to take that link. You do the three dots, open a new window, and then that'll give you the web address of the file itself inside of Drive. And at the end of that, it'll be /view equals open drive or something. After that slash is the last thing. Everything after that slash gets deleted, and you write the word copy. And then it'll
I got that part. I just wasn't sure how you got it to open up in a window. So it's those three dots, that
three dots. Yep, three dots, open a new window. Cool.
Yep.
All right. So now what we'll do, because I'm sure everyone knows how to make bullet pointed slides, let's go the other direction and let's do something different and a little bit fun. And let's think about comic books and graphic novels. And those are sort of two very different things in terms of how they look, of course, reading genre, but also how you might create them. So I'm going to show you some basic things, and then I'll give you guys some time to actually build one for yourself. And this will be the first thing that you build in that folder that we just created. So I really like when my screen sharing is efficient. Okay, so this is a slide. That's the first slide of a comic book, let's say, right? Now, it's not so much a traditional comic book with, you know, the different panels and stuff, but I created a stage, a spotlight, you know, I got my character. Now, we're going to do the character and stuff later, but I'm going to show you how you can use shapes to create things that don't exist. And this goes to this whole thinking outside the box. So I'm going to come over to my STI folder. And the big thing, and I always stress this with everybody, is before you press that new button, don't press the new button until you where you want to be. So what that means is I'm going to actually go into, I'm going to find it, and then I have so many folders. I'm going to go into the folder. So my slides beyond the presentation 2021. So this is my folder. This is my 5591 folder, right? I'm not going to press that new button until I'm in the place I want to be, because then that'll make my new thing in that location. And it's how you can stay organized. If you're just in My Drive and you click the new button, you're just going to have a million things in My Drive, and it's going to be harder to find them. Always go into the folder that the thing belongs in before you make the thing. So I'm going to make a new Google slide. And when it opens up, and you guys will eventually do this in a second. 5591. Oh, whoop. I'll just call it like that, right? Now, I'm gonna get rid of the theme, and I have this. This square, everyone always focuses on kind of the two squares here, or the three squares here, or rectangles. Meaning you've got the title one, right? You've got the subtitle one, but then you have the slide itself, right? That's that box. So we're going to do this next thing to get you guys literally to think outside this box, which is over here. Because over here is awesome because it doesn't exist, but you can use it. What do I mean by that? I mean this. So if I take, let's say, a shape, and I'm going to take a circle. Whoops. I'm going to take a circle, and I'm going to make my circle. I have this big gray circle. Now, if I look over, and this is oftentimes misunderstood, if I look up here, this in your slide sorter, this little preview of the slide is literally what is on the white space. And that's it. So it's showing you a miniature version of what you would see in present mode. Shows you just the slide, nothing else. So where you can think outside the box is this. If I need a semicircle, and I don't have one because one doesn't necessarily exist, I can just take this guy and I'm going to just drop him halfway off the slide. And now, if you look up here, you'll notice, annotator, where'd you go? You'll notice that now I only see the semicircle. Even though as a creator, I'm looking into space, what's happening is anything that goes beyond this line doesn't get shown to the audience, doesn't get shown in the final piece. So I can leverage that. Now, how can I leverage that if I can't necessarily see everything? The way you do that is with your view. So right here, there's a magnifier. So whenever you're looking at a Google slideshow sort of natively in its native form, it's going to be fit, whatever that is. Depending on the size of your screen, fit might be 110%, it might be 80%, whatever. It just depends on the size of your screen. But you can go to 50. And you have all this real estate out here that you can play around with. So like I look at this and I can see that in the top, like I have a little bit of white above my semicircle and a little bit below. I could decide that I'm actually going to take this and I'll stretch this out down to here. Again, going off the edge of the slide. And then now when I look up here, you can see that now I don't have that white area there. So I can use the edges of the slide to either keep myself in check or to create things that don't actually exist. Does that make sense to everyone? Number two, and then I'm going to have you guys create a scene, is this. This little ball right here, I can rotate, right? So I rotate this. Let's say I want to create a hill. So I'm going to drop this guy right here, and I'm going to stretch him over. And I'm doing that because now when I look up here in the top left, I can see it kind of looks like a hill. I want my hill to be grassy. So I'm going to click that. There's my grassy hill. I need a sky. So I'm going to grab another shape. And I'm going to put my sky in. Now that's green too. I don't want that. So I'm going to go blue. Blue sky. But now that looks weird because it's like on top of my hill. With this object selected, now this is what I was talking about earlier. In a document, you're dealing with text and things kind of have to fit around the text. In Google Slides, they're all objects. Everything is in a box. I can take this and I can go arrange, order, send to back. And now I've got a little hill with a little blue sky behind it. So I can create a setting, so to speak. What's also really cool is, let's say I take a line. I'm just gonna stick a line right here. I'm gonna use my line thickness and I'm gonna make it a really big line. So I have this random line right there, right? Let's change the color of that line to, I don't know, let's make it red. I'm gonna take another shape and I'm gonna put that guy right there, right? So I'm gonna make a sign. There's gonna be a sign on my hill. And I'm looking up here in the top corner. I can see that my sign is fully on my hill. I can see there's a little bit of a background to it. The greatest thing about shapes is that every shape is automatically a text box also. So as long as this is selected, I just start typing. I don't need to double click into it. It's chosen. I can just welcome to my hill. I can highlight it. I can make it bold. I can put it in the center. I can change the size. And then, even though this is a slideshow, and even though this is just a title slide, it's really not. So if I go to present mode, loading, gotta love rural DSL. Well, there it goes. So we got this hill. So this is a slideshow, but it's a slideshow that now I have turned into something more visual, something more graphic, because you can use shapes to kind of create that as a rough idea of like a graphic novel. Now, again, not a real graphic novel and not perfect, but what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to do that. So in your folder, create a slideshow called STI 5591 comic and create with shapes some form of a backdrop. It could be a stage, it could be a hill, and go beyond the edges of the slides. Like if you're like, well, there's no like arch. Well, of course there's no arch. Make that circle go over the edges of the slide to then create that visual arch, knowing that whatever you see in present mode is what the audience sees, or whatever you see in that slide on the left is what the audience sees. So you can go beyond the bounds of that slide to create something without the audience realizing there's all these other factors at play. Cool. So spend a few minutes, do that, go into that Google Drive folder, that STI 5591 Google Drive folder. When you're in that folder, make an STI 5591 comic slideshow and create a backdrop. Use some shapes, create a layered backdrop of some form. And you can put a sign on it if you want, like I did. I'm happy to answer questions while we wait. Ooh. And then Kara, I saw you popped in a few minutes after we got started. There's a link to the blog post where all the resources are and where the replays of this will be. And the agenda and stuff. And basically the first thing was in your drive, create an STI 5591 folder, which will serve as our sort of working space as well as your project at the end. And we're just doing that, making a new comic slide deck inside of that folder, just using shapes to kind of create a backdrop of some form.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Give you guys a couple more minutes and we'll do a little share. Do one more minute and then we'll do a little sharing. And don't worry if it's not done or whatever. They'll be want to get you guys to a certain point, show you a little bit more, get you to a certain point. You know what I mean? All right, cool. So that's the time. All right, so we'll just go around my screen and we'll just share for a minute so everyone has sharing permissions. So Kathleen, why don't you share and let's just see what sort of backdrop you made.
All right, let me
So
see here.
at the bottom of Zoom, there's that share screen button. And if you click that, then you can share the window of Chrome.
Okay, I'm on the Zoom and let's see, I see leave reactions. I don't see the share, but I got so many windows open.
You don't have a green share screen button?
Yep, there I see it.
Yep.
Okay,
Press that and you'll choose that Google Chrome.
all right.
Oh, that's awesome. You got a sailboat.
Yeah, I was playing around with the sun, but I didn't like this sun. I thought it was too much, so I moved it off.
No, and that's fine. And actually, because it's highlighted, you can actually just press delete and it'll remove just that object.
Yeah.
So anytime you have that blue box around something, you can just press delete and it'll actually delete it and then it's gone. And that's great. And I like that you got the person in there in the boat, because we're going to actually, that leads into what we're going to do next, which is talking about like adding those other elements. And that's cool. Like, yeah, and you got the different, I like how you layered those twisted shit, the banners to create like the waves and the motion.
That's what I was going for. I don't know if it came out, but.
No, totally. And that's the thing. And that's sort of why I lead with this particular like exercise, is like showing you that you like, it doesn't just have to be text. We could play around with these different objects. We could play around with the space to like create something different and use the slideshow in a different way to create something a little bit more interesting. I love it. Cool. Let's go. Who's next on my screen? Sarah, you're next on the screen on my little grid.
All right, so I'm just gonna share. Oh, sorry, we use Google Classroom or Google Meet. I just share.
Oh, share. Left-hand side probably is like the Chrome window. There's like a little thumbnail of your actual.
It says it's like wants to record my screen. I think I have to give it permission.
Yes.
Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, Google Meet. It's that, I know it's a button that's called something different in the bottom right-hand corner. It's called like present or something.
It says Zoom won't be able to record the contents of my screen until it's quit. Should I quit and reopen?
Don't worry about that. I'll. Are you on a Chromebook? What kind of device are you on?
I'm on a Mac.
You're on a Mac?
I'm on a Mac.
I've never seen. So you hit share screen and then it should just pop up.
It's not. Is it start share or?
Yeah.
Oh, I see it now. Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry
Awesome.
about that.
No problem.
So I made a little studio.
That's cool. Yeah, and then and you see like the windows, how you make it seem like the room extends past what the person is viewing, which creates a little bit of that like three-dimensional aspect. And
Can
then,
I ask, how did you do the colors in the window, like with the way it kind of fades?
I went to fill and then I chose a gradient instead of a solid color. And then I picked two different, I just changed the colors on both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, cool. Okay, thank you.
yeah, and what we'll do too is in a minute we'll talk about sort of going back to the characters and things with Kathleen, is how then you can even start layering these and get like super crazy complicated. And then what you could do too, Sarah, is like, if you wanted to with in terms of balance, you could take like that middle window, you could even move it over and use those red lines, and we'll talk about the blue lines to like if you wanted things to be like perfectly spaced and things like that.
Yeah, that was bothering me too.
Stuff like that bothers me.
Yeah,
that stuff bothers me all the time.
Once we get into the background, foreground, I was like, okay, he's speaking my language. I can do this.
Yeah, and we'll talk in a minute. Like, I wanted you guys just to play around a little bit, and then once everyone kind of shares, then I'm going to go a little bit more into specifics about like kind of that because I'm super OCD. Some of you know me and they can vouch for that. Amanda, you're up. Nice. The sun's rising between the mountains.
Yeah, I mean, I have limited access right now. It's letting me do Google Slides, but that's about it. But
No problem. That's cool.
Yeah,
But again, I like that. Like, and you see that, like, you don't have to have that, like, dropping those triangles below the edge of the slide creates that sense that there's something greater outside the sort of the field of vision, which sort of tricks the mind into thinking that it's not shapes, that it's not this flat object. It helps to kind of, you know, change that up. And then the clouds moving at those different sizes also helps to give it a little bit of motion. It helps to kind of make it seem like it's not this flat sort of stationary object. It kind of, again, sort of tricks the eye. And that's really what this is about sort of knowing that we can play around with these ideas and use this platform in a much more fun way. And that works.
I wanted to put snow on top of the mountains, but
Mhm.
I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
I tried dropping triangles, but I couldn't get them to line up with like the top of the mountain. So I just gave up.
Yeah. So it gets a little tricky. There are limitations to shapes of what we can do. But again, going back to the character thing, I'll show you how you can kind of create outside of slides, sort of step away from it for a second, make some things that then become sort of fixed images that you then can bring back in and manipulate. And that's part of the thing, is like knowing not just what you could do with slides, but also knowing that you can add a ton of stuff to slides, which again is why I love it, because it's not like a document, which is just so text-based and text-centric, but slides is like objects. It's like a text box, a shape. They're all just little blue squares that you can manipulate and you could layer. And that's why I really like it, because you could find a limitation in slides. Like, oh no, wait, I can do this over here. Let me do it real quick and then bring it in, and then kind of mix and match and know when to kind of leverage the strength of each platform. Donna, let's see what you got.
Okay, I got kind of stuck on making a sun, so I didn't get very far. Yeah.
That's fine.
So I got stuck on trying to figure out the yellow, to make the lines yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was using thought bubbles for clouds, and then I realized they really had cloud shapes. So but the next step would be to put land in a tree. So that's where I was going.
No problem. And that's fine. A lot of this is also too just that discovery of knowing that stuff's there. And that is true. Like, everyone sort of initially looks at the call outs, which is the speech bubbles and thought bubbles. And then it's, oh, I got to get rid of the little speech line. But there is the same shape in shapes, the cloud, that's essentially the exact same thing as the thought bubble, just without the three dots going up to it.
Which I discovered, and then I had to delete my clouds, and doing the lines on the sun took a while for me.
It's all good. And again, we're going to get into some nuanced tricks in a minute. Joannie, you're up.
All right, mine doesn't look as good, but
it's all good. No, that's awesome. Yeah, and again, you've got that. So now this is great, actually, because if you look closely at this, you can see that you didn't drag your hill out far enough. Because if you look in your bottom corners,
yeah, I couldn't. I was trying.
So no, and that's fine. So and this is why, this is how you kind of trick the eye, or how the eye then recognizes that it's being tricked. It's like you have to kind of go the distance, because little things like that then kind of break that sort of mental wall, right? So what you do is, get out of present mode, Joannie, stay sharing, but just, so then what you do, this is where, if you go to that magnifying glass up under the word insert, so change that to 50%. Okay. Now you have more room to drag out that box. And that's where changing your size, and then you can even stretch it, if you want, and you can move it around, you can adjust it. And that's where using that magnifying glass to change the view or the view scale helps, because then you can actually go out past that line.
Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. This is what we're here for. Lisa, let's see what you got.
I feel a little intimidated. I was just
Don't feel. We're making comic books and Google Slides. Nothing to be intimidated.
You'll see. Okay. So I was just actually playing with the colors, trying to do the gradient thing. Because I liked that Kathy's idea of using the banners to make the waves. I was
Yeah.
trying to do a beach thing.
Mhm.
But yeah.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
great. I think there's nothing wrong with it. And then I like the little umbrellas in the sand.
I'm glad you could tell they were umbrellas. I was a little nervous
No, totally. With the line,
when he's laughing at me.
no, it's great. And like one of the things I'm going to show you is like how you can take what you did, like you have 3 different sets of line waves, but instead let's just use the same one over and over again. And when you start doing that, then it starts to bring that consistency and helps to kind of create that like visual trickery in a sense of saying like, oh yeah, that really is. But I could tell like your rectangle for your sky has that gradient, which makes it and separates it differently than the waves. I think it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great.
Gotcha.
And then, and that was also, I didn't give you a whole lot. I showed you guys how to blend a couple of shapes. I sent you off into the world without a lot of support on that one, sort of intentionally, because I wanted you guys to kind of fumble a little bit. So that'll make the next step in this process make a lot more sense. Kara, let's see what you got. Do you know how to share your screen?
I am trying. And it's desktop I'm sharing from, right?
Yep.
I don't know if this is right.
There you go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Visibility.
Yep. No, I can see it.
Okay. Is that, can you
It's
still see
loading.
it?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So not
Cool.
very unique.
Good. No, I think it looks great. And again, this is just the first. I gave you guys the most basic of directions, and that's great. Like the hill goes across the bottom left-hand corner. Your hill didn't go quite as far across, but again, that's just
Okay.
a matter of using that magnifying glass to change your view from like fit to like 50%, and then that'll let you stretch it out and go much further out.
Okay.
But just little nuances. So now that you guys have done these things with very little direction on my part, and you fumbled around, which is perfect. I wanted you guys to fumble around because now what I'm going to show you will hopefully then make a lot more sense, and it will help you kind of refine and think about the different things that can be helpful. So if I get my slideshow up, okay, there's this. All right, so 2 things to begin with, which is when you're making something, and let's say I'm just going to do something simple. I'm not even going to go super crazy. I'm just going to do this. So I have these things. Now, right now I'm seeing these red lines. What this red line is going to tell me is that those 2 shapes are centered on each other. The reason why I chose this particular slide with this title and text box, even though I'm not going to use them, is because it's just going to give me like points of reference. With slides, like if I take this box and I move it up, I now have a horizontal red line across the top and a vertical red line on the side. What that means is that square is lined up with the top of the text box and the left side of the text box. So Google is great about giving you all of these lines. Now, if I put this here, this line goes not all the way across. If you notice, it stops before the end of the slide. What that means is I've centered, not on the slide, but I've centered on just this text box where it says click to add text. That's all I'm centered on. If I wanted to center one of these on the entire slide, I have to go up and wait until I get the red line that goes all the way from edge to edge. So you can use those red lines to orient objects on the slide or in relation to each other. So now I have, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this one over here. So now this particular box is centered on the whole slide, and it's lined up to the edge of the text box. This box is centered on the text, on the box and the whole slide. Now, if I take this and let's say I copy and paste it, I could bring this over here those two are touching. If I bring this way, if you look at the bottom of these boxes, you see those little blue brackets? Those blue brackets are telling me that if I let go, there's going to be equal space in between those boxes. So you can use the red lines. Like now, obviously I'm off center, like, and I've screwed it up, right? But if I wanted to recenter myself, I could bring this up. Now that's telling me that this middle square is centered with the right side square and it's touching the left side square. And then same thing, I bring this up. And then now I can see that red line is going to tell me that because it doesn't go all the way to the slide, those three boxes are going to be centered on each other. And if you look at the bottom, you see those little blue brackets. Those little blue brackets are going to let me know that even though it may look weird to me visually, I know that this space is equal to this space. So you can use those red lines and those little blue brackets to help you orient and adjust for the size of things. Similarly, when you take this down, let's say, oh, that was too far. So notice like that's giving me different blue brackets. Like if I let go, it's basically telling me that if I let go here, there's an equidistant between the edge of both sides of this new shape to those outside borders of the other ones. So that's what that's doing. So you'll see as you move objects around, you'll see all these red and blue lines or these blue brackets. And that's going to help you to frame things and make things organized. Everyone good with that? That makes sense? Now, in relation to something like the window and having those various colors, you can take a shape and you can go to this fill bucket, and instead of a solid color, you can choose a gradient. Choose something like that, right? And it gives you this gradient. It gives you this, dark to light. You can do a custom, and you can change the colors and where does it go? Does it go from dark to light, light to dark, things like that? What you also could do is you could fake it till you make it. What I mean by that is this. You can take, we'll just get a blank one real quick. So I have this shape, right? I want to make this shape a window. May not be perfect, but what I can do is I'm going to make my line a little bit thicker. I can then copy and paste this. And then using what we just talked about, I could kind of come in here and I can make a pane. Right? And I just have that. Now I can copy and paste that again. I can line it up. Now it looks like they're not the same shape or not the same size because I can see that one's overlapping. So this is where I could actually line it up. And now that's even. You can kind of play around with it. So I see that you can see that it's telling me it's the same size. Now, obviously it's a little bit weird because I have this gap, but you can play around with shapes like this and kind of layer them. So then if you wanted to, this shape, could be blue and this shape could be blue, but maybe this one is a gradient of blue, and then obviously that's a stark sort of contrast example, but I'm doing that to show you how you can actually layer these shapes and then use the gradients and the colors to kind of create different visual effects. And you can take this and you might even take this and make it the same gradient. So it's like that one. And you say, well, but the pane looks a little bit weird. Well, it does. But if you had 4 of these, so if I deleted that, let's say I just put these together. And then so you don't drive yourself nuts trying to fix the shape on all of them, put your 4 panes together. And then what you do is using those red lines, right? So now I'm lined up with that guy lined up. And then I'm just going to take this one back here, drag it down, line it up, and I'm going to bring it in and line it up. And there's that. Now this is technically 5 objects. Right? We have the one big one in the background, and then I did those 4 panes. You don't necessarily need that one in the background if you're going to do the 4 panes. So I could always delete that. It doesn't change anything. But then what happens is if I want to keep this and reuse it, and this goes to the waves in the ocean, let's reuse it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag across, and I'm going to select all of those together. I'm going to go to arrange, and I'm going to group them. Now, if I move it, it doesn't move as one individual. I have now taken all 4 of those objects and created one object about it, which is really nice because then I can shrink it and it'll shrink it at scale. So it won't distort it, it shrinks them all together. And then I can copy and paste. And if I wanted to, I could find the center, like let's say for that art studio idea, this vertical column means that that object is directly in the center of the slide once it moves, because there you go. And then I can keep pasting these, and I can decide that, all right, I like that distance. And if I wanted to, so then those are all set the same distance off center of that first one. And as I keep doing it, I keep getting those brackets. What that's doing is that's allowing me to know that I'm continuing. The red line is saying that my windows are all in order, and then those little blue brackets are saying all my windows are equally distributed. I want to create that effect of having the room extend beyond my field of view. Same thing, just bring this over, and then look at that. You'll get that right on the edge. So then you're not going to see a lot, but you'll see like a little edge of the window. And it helps to create that notion that the thing extends beyond what we're seeing. And that's a way you can kind of make those objects. Now, how does that match up with the wave? So let's do this. We'll take my ocean. And we'll make my ocean a nice deep blue sea. So now we can take the line, this little drop down will give me other options, right? So like the line is the line. I could also do an arrow, right? And those arrows are really nice because they're not like the boxy arrows, like the shape arrows. I hate the shape arrows. Whenever I'm going to use an arrow, I always use a line arrow just because they look better. But you can also do things like curved and scribble. So let's say I do curved. I could start and I click to start, and then I kind of drag out and I click again, and see it creates a curve. And I can double click, and then there's my curve. I'll make that white. Well, let's say I really like that as the start of a wave. What I could do is I can click on it and I can copy and paste it and kind of overlap it. Whoops. I'm lining that up. So let's say those are like my wave. I realize it's not perfect, but then I can click on the one, hold down shift, and I click on the other two. Arrange, group. Now it's one, copy, paste. Oops, keep grabbing the wrong thing. And then I can adjust it, and I can have the same, if I like the look of a particular wave or a particular shape, a sand dune, whatever it may be, all I have to do is get it to a point where I like it, and then I just copy and I group the things together. I keep grabbing the wrong one. And then I can just do this. And then that's a way to kind of keep creating without having to drive yourselves nuts and trying to recreate the whole thing. Get one done. And even if it's a couple of objects together, get one perfect look. Select them, hold down shift, click, 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 arrange, group. They're then grouped together. Then you can copy and paste them. And then you're not having to recreate the same thing every single time. Cool. 2 quick tricks with this, and then I'm going to have you guys do something. Command Z on a Mac or the undo button, biggest friend in the world, because you jack something up, don't worry about it, click undo. Control Z on a PC, Alt, Control Z on a Chromebook, Command Z on a Mac, it undoes it. So like, don't worry about it. You make a mistake, just do the undo button, it goes back. Number 2, if you click on something, like let's say I have a shape, right? Let's say I have this. And I click on it, use my arrow key. See how it jumps and it moves? Sometimes when you're creating, you don't want it to jump quite as far. Hold down Shift and use the arrow, and it will move in fractional increments. So if you want to fine tune something, Shift while you're using the arrow, it'll move it in fractional increments. Cool. Everyone good so far? Hopefully that helps clarify a couple of funky points that you guys were struggling with earlier. That's sort of the idea. Now, what we're going to do now for the last sort of like, we have 20 minutes left for part of the 20 minutes, is we're going to think about how we want to layer things together and how we don't necessarily want to recreate the wheel on every slide if we're doing something like this. We want to leverage the fact that we can copy and paste. We also want to leverage the fact that we can duplicate a slide. So literally, like, you create a background, you click on that slide sort on the left. If you control click on it, you get a little menu that pops up and it'll say duplicate slide. You can duplicate that slide and then that's it. You don't have to recreate all this stuff that you've done. You can use the same work and reuse the same work you've done. But what happens if you want to add something fun or different, like a character, let's say, like that guy in the sailboat? So as an example of what I'm talking about, here's a little fun thing I did a number of years ago as part of a stack class. So this is my comic book for a stack class. Picture of Heathcote, some balloons, and there's my guy. That's me. That's my comic book version of me. Some fun little animations, the balloon took it away. So here's my stage, right? This is a stage where my character is presenting to the audience. And I have my backdrop, I have all my stuff. I have my next page where I'm talking about Google Drawing. Excuse me, but behind it, it's the same background. It's the same main slide. It's that background slide without the character on it. I basically had one slide background that I really liked, and I kept duplicating it. And I was taking other elements from other places, blending these things together, which again is why slides can be so utilitarian in that way, because it doesn't have to be just about wedging in certain objects. So how do we get to this point? Well, this tutorial actually tells you how to do it, but I'll show you. So it's possible to create, we've been doing it in here, it's possible to do it, but it gets a little bit mucky and a little bit messy because you're like, well, I got my backdrop and I want to put my person on the backdrop, kind of gets crowded. For this, if I wanted to recreate this, I just control click on it. I could duplicate the slide. Then I have the same one. I can change the sign. I could delete an element if I want. But let's say I want to make that person. I want to make that guy in the sailboat. I want to make me. I want to make whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be you. It could be that one sort of recurring item that shows up in places. What you can do is you can, let me go to my folder. I'm trying to be good about not having 17 tabs open, but it means I keep forgetting where I am. And I know that I probably have 17 tabs open, but usually I have 417 tabs open. So I'm trying to be a good guy. So in my folder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new, and I'm actually going to more. I'm going to make a Google Drawing. And you guys are going to do this in a minute. Now, the reason why I'm having you do this, because I know you might say, well, but this is a Google Slides class. It is, but so many Google elements are cross-pollinated, like shapes, like the ability to group things, like the ability to bring things from one Google platform into the other that leverage the power of each. Meaning, for something like, let's say, a recurring element in a comic book, like let's say it's my character that I use, right? I'll call this STI 5591. We'll just call it character. So let's say it's like that in this, right? Where I have this person, I have this version of me that I know I'm going to use in my Google slideshow comic book. I don't want to have to make this guy over and over again. I don't want to have to accidentally copy him or get him connected with my background. I want to know that I have certain elements. I have my stage elements. I have my character element. I have a microphone element. I have these different pieces. So what I do is I say, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a Google drawing of just the element that I can then copy and paste into my Google Slides. So I can really quickly, and what I like to do is I always like to start with a snowman because it's sort of the easiest way to illustrate this point. So let's say I'm going to have a snowman. Now, again, that red line, just like in Google Slides, it means that those two elements are lined up with each other. And you can always tell that based on where that red line ends. Since it ends on those two objects, it means it's not dealing with the rest of the page. It's dealing just with those two objects, right? So they're there. Now, if I wanted to line this up with this page, I could. You see that goes all the way through. Then obviously bring this guy over. And I have this. Now, that's not as big a concern because we're going to end up taking this out of this, but just know that those red lines and those blue brackets, you'll see those everywhere, which is why I like to sort of use multiple Google platforms to kind of reinforce those points. This checkerboard background is actually transparent, which is good because it means that anything that is the checkerboard will show up not as nothing. It won't show up as white. It'll show up as transparent, which is really helpful. Now, here's the kicker with something like, and the reason why I like to make my separate elements in something like Google Drawing is I mentally get rid of the presentation stuff. I focus just on that element. I'll go back to my presentation when I want to toss my character in because I know that my character is going to do a bunch of stuff in this setting. So I'll make my character. Now, this line right here, this little half moon is always the problem. People will say, well, I don't want this line right here. Well, but if you come over here to line and you do transparent, it takes off of everything. And that looks weird too. What if you want to, I mean, you could come over here and you could do this and get rid of that, and that's fine. But if you had this, but you wanted this to go away, sort of like when Donna realized that callouts speech bubble was actually the same thing as shapes cloud. What you do is you have to look for the other thing. Now the other thing is the same thing. There's no eraser, but the way you hide things like this would be you just basically take the same object, put it over top of it. Right? Looks weird. Now you take this one, now you make that line transparent. And now it hides just a certain section of that. So again, it's how you can kind of use these pieces and manipulate them a little bit, thinking not just as, oh, I have to slap one thing on and then write some text in it, or I have to it's only going to be what it shows me. Well, it doesn't have to be. You can manipulate it and you can tweak it and sort of finesse it to be what you need. Then you can come over here. Now, very similar to what I was talking about earlier, I'm going to make an eye, right? But I want to not, it's hard for me to work in such small shapes as an eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a big giant eye. And then I'll come in here and I'll make sort of the center part of my eye, but I'm going to make that a little, I'm going to make that a little more gray. And then I'm going to give myself, I don't know. And see, that's telling me, again, that little bracket, that the height, it's like right in between. It's lined out at the bottom, it's equidistant, right? So then I'm going to take that, and I don't know, we'll give myself green eyes, right? So there's that. I'm going to click and drag and select them all, arrange, group, just like I did earlier with the waves and the windows. And now I can make this super tiny. I can drag it over there. And I can copy and paste it. Right? And there's that. That's my eyes. I like to come over here and I do the curve for the nose. I can make the nose a little bit thicker. Oops. And then for the mouth, I like to do this one. We'll rotate it. Put it like right there. Let's go like that with the mouth, and then we'll sort of stretch it, right? I can use those little gold ones to kind of change the pitch on it. So there's that. Not perfect, but quick, down and dirty, right? I want some arms. And I'm going to do this to show you why the transparency is helpful. So this is my arm. And he's just going to be standing there very sort of confrontational, like with his hand on his hip. Now, I like how it shows up here, but I don't like how it's on top of my face. So I can click on the face and I can go arrange, order, bring forward. And you see how that kind of changes the layout because it brought that line to the forward. I may not want that. So I could do this and I can think about order, send backward. Now you notice it's not going behind what I wanted to go behind because it's not reading my mind in terms of what it thinks I want. What it's doing is it's sending it behind the most recent object. So right now it's technically behind this. And then if I do arrange, order, send backward again, it's technically behind the nose because it's sending it behind in the order of which you stack these, because that's really what we're doing is we're stacking these pieces. So what I can do is I can actually just not worry about it for right now, but I could adjust my backwards, forwards to the different objects. But just for the sake of expeditiousness, I'm going to take this, I'll put this over here. Because the real point of me showing you this is you see these little gaps right here. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to arrange. I'm going to group it all. So now it's one piece and I'm going to copy it. And now I can come over to my background and I can paste it. You'll notice that I can see the green of my hill between the arms because it's transparent. And I can make that guy smaller and I can move him around. And then the benefit of this is if this setting, let's say didn't have, this had something different, right? I can take him now and I can then paste him here and make him bigger. So then between these two, I could easily change the perspective, meaning he's here, big, and it's a close-up shot. And then now it's further away, he's smaller. And all I did was just change and adjust the size of that element. And you can start creating and manipulating that comic book notion of they're pictures, but you can create motion and perspective with them just by the size of the shape. So basically, we got 8 minutes left. What you're going to do is I want you to make a Google drawing inside of your folder. It could be a simple character, right? Something, it could be snowman, something, whatever, a couple elements as a way to think about designing, not a background. We're not doing speech bubbles, not doing whatever. This is a way to kind of now, like I had you guys kind of work on this big space and do this big background and some of you guys put in stuff. And it was fine. It was great. But now let's dial it back a little bit and say like, okay, what if I just focus on using those shapes just for one purpose, which is just a character that eventually I will then paste into my comic book in slides. So still using shapes, still using the stuff we talked about, still using those techniques, but now let's not worry about all the things. He may be, or it may be, she may be, whatever, may end up on the beach. Fine. Focus just on that character that will eventually go onto the beach or the mountains. And then Amanda, to this point, is like, this would be a kind of place where like you could sit there and design a mountain and be more fine-tuned with your snow caps and kind of adjust and play around and not be so focused on all the other pieces, but you could focus on like one aspect that we then can layer into your actual comic book. Cool.
How
So
did
go-
you choose that transparency background with like the gray?
So that Google Drawing does it automatically. And that's
Okay.
why for something like that, that's why I like doing Google Drawing. If I want to create just something simple and stand alone that I'll use somewhere else. So if you go into your STI folder now, go to
Mhm.
new, more, Google Drawing, call the file, 5591 character, and think about just the character. Don't worry about the background right now. Like eventually we'll take this character and bring it in, but it's a way now to sort of mentally strip out all the noise of the setting and focus simply on the character.
How do you flip or rotate a shape?
So you have the shape. So there's two different questions. They're both very good questions. So I'll share my screen and I'll show you. There's two sort of things at play there. So if, let's say, here, I'll use my little arm again, right? So I have this, it makes it like this. To rotate, there's this little blue dot at the top. If I press and hold on that, it rotates it. So obviously you could rotate like all the way around, and that would be a manner of flipping, right? So if I copy this and paste it, I could theoretically then rotate it all the way around, and that would be flipping it. Now, in theory, what you can also do is if you had this, you can, like you can take these corners, and what the corner will do is it'll change it in perspective. The middle boxes will squish it or stretch it. It'll change the perspective, right? You can get funky and go through itself. So you could take this one on this side, instead of going out, you could actually bring it in, and then it'll flip it around.
Wow, cool.
Right.
All
So, right. So, and it depends on the shape. So like this particular example, it's just easier to rotate it all the way around because
Yep.
it's essentially a mirror image of itself, but you could take that corner and drag it through itself and bring it. You could do it
Could
the
you
other
do
way.
that with your group, like your little guy? Could you make another guy that's looking
Yeah.
the
So like,
opposite?
right. So you could do this. And then that would be a situation where, yeah, I mean, if I took this and I went this way with them, totally. And that's an example of, I wouldn't make that here. I would use this place to just make my one person, right? Where I have, this is just clean. This is my original clean one. Then when I copy him into this, then this is where I can say, all right, I'll copy and I'll paste him. And I'm going to make this guy face this way. And then they can have a conversation. The reason I do that is I kind of keep one clean original version that's just basic and clean and simple. I then can do some subtle tweaks and say, let's say it's like the, parent child. They're talking to each other. I'm not going to add speech bubbles in here. This is just a character. But over here, this is where then I can start to come in and I can do call outs and I can, drop my speech bubble, and say like, listen, kiddo, and then I can put the speech bubble in, or the thought bubble rather. And these little dots, these little yellow dots are kind of what you move. And then I'll just change this to be white and say, no child. Right, so you could do that in here. That way, like you have the Google drawing be sort of your base. And then you can then bring it into Google Slides and manipulate it and copy it and flip it around, turn it upside down, do all sorts of stuff to it. But you keep with a very simple, clean baseline in here, again, focusing on the character and its traits before you actually bring it into the setting of your story. And then you can manipulate it more in the setting and add your dialogue in the setting. So you're still creating this comic book, this graphic novel. It's still this literary piece, but you're sort of attending to the character and its traits in one space. You're attending to like the setting in one place. And then eventually, once you've got your setting, then you're kind of layering in the character and then eventually the dialogue to kind of bring all those elements together. Cool. Everyone good so far? All right, so it's 5 o'clock. We'll wrap it up. Any questions before I say my final piece? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully have this recording posted within a day. It just sort of depends on how fast it'll upload here and it'll be on the blog post. You're welcome to keep messing around with this character and the setting, but you don't have to. We're gonna come back over this and sort of review this and the elements of this next week. Because again, the reason why we're kicking off with this is because everyone knows how to put text and bullet points in a Google slide. This is about thinking about this platform in different ways and thinking about how we could really manipulate it. We'll do a little bit more of this next time. We'll also kind of go Knuffle Bunny style with it, because sort of using real backgrounds with then we'll reuse your same character, or using real pictures but adding speech bubbles and things like that to create different types of stories. And then as the sessions go on, we'll also get more into actual presentations like Ignite Talks and TED Talks and ways to use this to create stories or narratives where either you or your students stand up in front of people, tell the story and present, but the slides behind them are clean and crisp and sort of convey like that simple, poignant message without being kind of overloaded. Cool. Everyone good? All right. So I will see
So just
everyone.
to clarify,
Yeah.
there, you said there's no async time?
No,
Or there is?
nope, there isn't. So if you don't want to work on this anymore, you don't have to. Like I said, we're going to kind of, I'll give you some more time next week. This was kind of like the sort of the intro class where we had to do a lot of the housekeeping at the beginning. So we'll do a lot more this next time. So yeah, you do not have to do, there's no expectation of work between now and next time, which is why we have the 6 sessions, just because then next time we'll spend a lot more in class time working and sharing. Today we lost a large portion just to sort of housekeeping, general Google stuff and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, you're welcome to keep working if you want, but you do not by any means have to go beyond what we've done right now.
Okay. And I don't want to keep people if they have to go, but I have one more question for after.
No problem. All right. Well, so I'm going to stop the recording. If you need to jump, you can jump, and then I'll see you guys next week. But stay on if you have any follow-up questions.